All right, everyone, buckle up. Because today we're diving into something I'm sure we've all thought about at some point this year, especially if you haven't gone through it already.
Yeah.
Performance reviews.
Oh, yeah. Those.
We all know that feeling, right? That mix of, okay, what's it going to be this time? And just a little bit of, do we have to?
Yeah, I get it.
But what if I told you it might not be the be-all and end-all of your career? What if those yearly reviews, especially if you're doing good work, are more of a formality than anything else?
Really?
That's what we're digging into today, based on some research on performance reviews. Basically, it says that if you're killing it at work, those annual reviews are more about catching any problems early on than, throwing a party for the top performers. So it's less about celebrating the wins and more about making sure everyone's still on track. I'm interested to hear more.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. When there aren't any big issues, you know what I've noticed? Managers often fall back on those kind of generic compliments, like solid year or keep up the good work.
But I would have thought being more specific with praise is better.
You'd think so, right? But it really comes down to this. If there's nothing major to critique, managers don't really need to write down every single observation about your performance.
So is it kind of like no news is good news? A short and sweet review equals a happy manager.
Exactly. Think of it like this. If your manager isn't raising any red flags, you're probably doing exactly what you need to be doing. They're focusing on the areas that actually need attention.
Makes sense. All right, so that's the short and sweet review. But what about when it's the opposite? What about when it's long, detailed, maybe a little out of the blue, and suddenly there's all this talk about areas for development and opportunities for growth? That's got to be a sign, right?
Right. That's when things get a little more, shall we say, interesting. A longer, more critical review, especially if it seems to come out of nowhere, can definitely be a signal that your manager is, they might be starting to build a case for something more serious.
You mean like a performance improvement plan? I'll be honest, those have always kind of scared me.
Exactly. A PIP. It's a formal process some companies use to address performance concerns. So at that detailed review, especially if it's highlighting things that need improvement, that can be the manager's way of documenting everything, just in case they do decide to go the PIP route.
So those opportunities for growth, sometimes they're not really about encouragement. They're more about documentation.
Sometimes, yeah. And that's why understanding this whole dynamic is so important.
Totally. But how does knowing this actually help us as employees?
Because it changes how you see those reviews and even how you approach your work throughout the year. Imagine this, you think everything's fine, then you get your review and it's like a whole list of things you need to improve. That right there, that's a sign to really pay attention, to figure out what your manager's really trying to tell you.
Like a little wake-up call.
Exactly. Before things get worse, knowledge is power, right? Especially with something as important as our performance reviews.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about what it means when a review is short and sweet and what it might mean when it's a little more involved. But how can we actually use this knowledge to our advantage, no matter what our reviews look like?
Such a good question. And it really gets to the heart of why understanding these little nuances is so important. Let's start with those who are just crushing it at work, consistently exceeding expectations.
Okay.
You might think, hey, my work speaks for itself. And while that's true to a point, there's a real strategic advantage here that a lot of people miss.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the secret to using those awesome reviews to your advantage?
It's all about seizing the moment, When you're consistently getting those glowing reviews, you're basically building this foundation to have some really productive conversations. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
So use that positive feedback as like a launching pad. But how? What are some ways we can actually leverage those good reviews?
Okay, let's say you're thinking about asking for a raise.
Okay.
Those positive reviews, those become like hard evidence of your value to the company. You can point back to specific things mentioned in those reviews to show why you deserve that raise.
So you're not just saying, I deserve more money. You're saying, look, I achieved X, Y, and Z, which you acknowledged in my reviews, so let's talk about how my compensation reflects that.
Exactly. It takes the emotion out of it and makes it about your track record. And it's not just about salary either. Think about promotions.
Oh, right. How does that tie in?
Same idea. If you're thinking about going for a promotion, those positive reviews are like ammunition. They demonstrate that you're not only performing well, but you're ready to take on more responsibility.
I've always felt a little weird bringing up promotions to my manager. Is it too soon, too pushy?
Yeah.
But what you're saying is if I've got a strong track record and it's documented in my reviews, That's the perfect time to start that conversation.
100%. It gives you a really solid foundation to build on. And honestly, it's not always about a fancier title or bigger paycheck. You can use positive reviews to your advantage in other ways too, like getting assigned to those exciting projects, the ones that really let you shine.
Oh, I love that.
Yep.
So it's about more than just the money or the title. It's about really taking control of your career trajectory, being strategic.
Exactly. And realizing that those performance reviews, they're not just a one-way street. They're a chance for you to speak up, to have a real back and forth with your manager, to shape your future, no matter where you're at performance-wise.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about what to do when things are going great. But what about those times when, well, maybe the review wasn't so great? How do you make the most of it when it feels like you're being told to improve?
In those situations, being proactive is absolutely key. Like, if you get a review and it's full of constructive criticism,
Right.
don't just stuff it in a drawer and try to forget about it.
Yeah.
Use it as a chance to open up communication with your manager. Schedule some regular check-ins.
No, you're taking it seriously.
Exactly. Use those check-ins to get really specific feedback. Ask clarifying questions about anything that seems vague and really show that you're committed to growing.
So you're not just passively accepting the feedback, you're actively engaging with it.
Yes, you're taking ownership of the situation. And another thing that's super helpful, document your achievements all year round, not just during performance review season.
Oh, like keeping track of all your wins.
Yeah. Keep a running list of positive feedback from coworkers, any projects where you went above and beyond, all of it.
That way, when it's review time, even if the overall feedback isn't all sunshine and rainbows, you've got concrete examples to bring to the table.
You got it. It's about taking control of your own narrative. Don't just wait for someone else to tell your story. Write it yourself.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
As we're talking about this, it makes me think about timing, too. Like those reviews that feel like they come out of left field,
Yeah.
they're almost always a sign that something's off with communication,
Yeah.
right?
100%. I'd even go so far as to say the best managers, the ones who really know how to help their team grow,
Yeah.
they get that feedback isn't a once-a-year thing.
Right.
It needs to happen all the time.
It's like imagine a workplace where every win is celebrated right away, where any little course correction happens naturally, where you're always on the same page about expectations.
Exactly.
That's the dream.
And can you imagine how much less stressful performance reviews would be if that were the case? It wouldn't be this big, scary event because you'd already be having those conversations all the time.
Right. And it's a two-way street, too. Like, if your manager isn't great at giving regular feedback, don't be afraid to ask for it. Schedule those check-ins. Tell them you want to grow. Keep them in the loop about your progress.
So communication is key, whether it's coming from you or from your manager, 100%. When you have that open dialogue, the whole review process becomes way less about judgment and way more about just making sure you and your manager are on the same page, working together.
Which is how it should be.
Right.
And speaking of being on the same page, we've talked about what to do when you're rocking it and what to do when you need to step it up. But what about that in-between space? Consistently good, but not necessarily blowing anyone away. What about those people?
That's such an important point because it's really easy to get comfortable when you're consistently meeting expectations. You start to think, I'm doing fine. No need to change anything.
Yeah, like don't rock the boat kind of mentality.
Exactly. But even when you're doing well, there's always room to improve, to try new things, to keep learning and growing.
So how do we fight against that complacency, even when we're getting good feedback? What's the key to breaking out of that holding pattern?
Complacency, it's a real thing, isn't it?
It's easy to just coast along when you're hearing good job year after year.
Exactly. But here's the thing. We should always be looking for ways to improve, no matter how well we're doing right now.
It's like that saying, you learn something new every day.
Yes, and it's so true in the workplace too. Even if you're already exceeding expectations, there's always something new to learn, some way to challenge yourself and grow your skills.
Okay, so what advice would you give to someone who's in that position? Consistently good, meeting expectations, maybe feeling a little stuck. How do you break out of that rut?
I think it starts with shifting your perspective a little. Instead of seeing your job as just a list of tasks to check off, think of it as an opportunity to constantly learn and grow.
I like that. An opportunity to learn and grow. It's like your job isn't just a job. It's a chance to become a better version of yourself.
Exactly. And one really practical way to do that, set big goals, like really ambitious goals, even if you're already doing well in your current role.
So don't be afraid to aim high, even if you feel like you're killing it already.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for more responsibility. Volunteer for those projects that really stretch your skills.
Right. Like, take the initiative. Don't wait for opportunities to come to you. Go out and create them for yourself.
Yes. And here's another thing. Ask for feedback all the time, not just during performance reviews. Ask your colleagues, your boss, even your clients, hey, how am I doing? What could I be doing better?
It's like you're constantly looking for ways to improve, to refine your skills.
Exactly. And that kind of attitude, that desire to always be learning and growing, that's what really sets people apart.
I love that. It's like those performance reviews, they can be really valuable if we let them. But it's up to us to take that feedback, whether it's good or bad, and use it to shape our own careers.
100%. It's about taking ownership, being proactive.
And remembering that communication is key.
Yes. Talk to your manager, ask for what you want, make sure you're both on the same page.
This has been so helpful. I feel like we've really demystified the whole performance review process.
Me too.
So for everyone listening, here's the key takeaway. Don't let that once-a-year review define your entire career. It's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Your career is a journey, and those reviews are just like checkpoints along the way. They can be really helpful, but only if we know how to use them to our advantage.
I completely agree.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the wild world of performance reviews. We'll be back next time with another fascinating topic, so be sure to subscribe and join us again. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep crushing it out there.